Maya Chen wiped down the marble countertop for the third time that evening. The restaurant wasn't particularly busy for a Thursday, but Mr. Harrington, the owner, insisted everything sparkle, especially when regulars like Mrs. Calloway were dining. The wealthy widow sat at her usual corner table, picking at her salad while speaking loudly into her phone about some charity auction. The soft jazz playing overhead couldn't quite mask Mrs. Calloway's voice. Maya caught fragments about a pianist and a last-minute cancellation. Something about the conversation made Maya's fingers twitch against the cloth in her hand. She quickly pushed the feeling away and moved to refill water glasses at table 7. "Everything tasting good tonight?" Maya asked a group of young professionals celebrating what sounded like a promotion. They nodded without really looking at her. That was typical at Harrington's. The waitstaff were meant to be invisible unless needed. Maya had perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight over the past 3 years. When her shift ended at midnight, Maya's feet ached as she counted her tips in the break room. $207, not bad. Combined with tomorrow's double shift, she might finally have enough for the security deposit on a better apartment. The current one had paper-thin walls that let in every argument from the couple next door and every bass note from the teenager below. "Heading out, Chen?" asked Zach, one of the bartenders, as he hung up his apron. Maya nodded, tucking the cash into her purse. "Got to catch the last train. Want company to the station?" He offered, not for the first time. "Thanks, but I'm good." Maya smiled politely. Zach was nice enough, but she preferred her solitude after hours of forced customer service cheerfulness. The midnight air had a bite to it as Maya hurried toward the subway station. October in the city brought chilly winds that snuck under her thin jacket. She quickened her pace, both from cold and habit. This neighborhood felt different at night, when the expensive stores were shuttered and the well-dressed crowds gone. 20 minutes later, Maya unlocked the door to her studio apartment. The space was small but meticulously organized, a necessity when living in 300 square feet. She placed her purse on the tiny kitchen counter and kicked off her sensible black shoes, wiggling her toes in relief. Despite her exhaustion, Maya didn't head straight for the fold-out bed. Instead, she moved to the corner where a sheet-covered shape took up precious floor space. With gentle hands, she pulled away the sheet to reveal a digital piano, not top of the line, but far better than she could afford new. She'd found it second-hand 3 years ago, shortly after moving to the city. Maya sat on the bench and rested her fingers on the keys without pressing down. For a moment, she just breathed, letting the day's tension drain from her shoulders. Then, with a quick glance at the clock, 12:40 a.m., she slipped on headphones and began to play. Her fingers moved with a grace and precision that transformed her. Gone was the tired waitress who spent hours carrying plates and smiling at strangers who never really saw her. In her place sat a musician whose body seemed to understand music on an instinctive level. Maya closed her eyes as she played from memory, a piece she'd composed herself over many late nights like this one. The music flowed through her as naturally as breathing. She hadn't always played this way. As a child, she'd taken lessons like many others, showing promise but nothing extraordinary. Then came the accident when she was 12, a car crash that took her father and left Maya in a coma for 11 days. When she woke, something had changed. The doctors called it acquired savant syndrome, a rare condition where extraordinary abilities emerge after brain trauma. For Maya, music had transformed from a hobby into something deeper, almost mystical. Notes formed patterns in her mind, colors and textures she could almost touch. Playing became as essential as eating or sleeping. For a few years, her mother had managed to keep her in lessons, amazed by her daughter's sudden transformation. Maya's teacher had called her a prodigy, urging competitions and special schools. But then her mother got sick. Medical bills piled up. By 16, Maya had stopped formal training to work after school. By 18, she'd lost both parents and music had become her private refuge. A secret joy she kept hidden from a world that had shown her little kindness. Now, at 28, Maya played only for herself. In the quiet hours when her neighbors were less likely to complain about the muffled sounds that escaped her headphones. The digital piano was a compromise. She longed for the resonance of a real grand piano, the way sound vibrated through wood and string, but such dreams seemed impossible on a waitress's income. The piece she played now started gently, like raindrops on a window, before building into something more complex. Her left hand created a rhythmic foundation, while her right danced above it, weaving melodies that spoke of longing and resilience. Maya felt the familiar sensation of losing herself in the music, her conscious mind stepping aside as something deeper took control. An hour passed before Maya finally stopped, her fingers hovering above the keys as the last notes faded in her headphones. She felt the familiar mixture of peace and emptiness that followed these sessions, like waking from a beautiful dream to find reality waiting. With a sigh, she covered the piano and headed for the shower. The hot water helped ease her tired muscles, but her mind remained active, replaying fragments of music. Sometimes she wondered what her life might have been if circumstances had been different. If her father hadn't died, if her mother hadn't gotten sick, if they'd had the money for the music academy that had once offered her a partial scholarship. As she pulled on an oversized t-shirt to sleep in, Maya pushed those thoughts away. Regret was a luxury she couldn't afford. Besides, she reminded herself, things could be worse. She had her health, a steady job, and her music, even if she played for no one but herself. Her phone buzzed with a text as she was brushing her teeth. It was from Lee, her manager at Harrington's. Need you to come in early tomorrow. Big private event. Black tie. Tips should be good. Maya typed back a quick okay before setting her alarm for 2 hours earlier than planned. Extra hours meant extra money, and she needed every dollar she could get. She'd been saving for months, not just for a better apartment, but for something more important: piano lessons. Not for technique, she didn't need those anymore, but for guidance on composition and theory, filling gaps in her self-taught knowledge. As she unfolded her sofa bed and smoothed the worn sheets, Maya's gaze drifted to the covered piano. Sometimes she imagined playing for an audience, not Mrs. Calloway and her wealthy friends, who would see her as a curiosity at best, but for people who truly understood music, who might recognize what she could do. The fantasy was brief. Maya knew the odds were stacked against her, a waitress with no formal credentials, no connections, no impressive resume. The music world was as elite as the restaurant where she worked, with its own gatekeepers and unspoken rules. Still, as sleep began to claim her, Maya couldn't help wondering what might happen if someone actually heard her play. Not the simple jazz standards she sometimes hummed while working, but her real music, the complex compositions that poured from some mysterious place inside her. What would they think? Would they listen, truly listen, or would they see only the waitress in sensible shoes, invisible until needed? Before drifting off, Maya made a decision. Tomorrow, after her shift, she would look up open mic nights around the city. Nothing fancy, just small venues where she might play for a few minutes. A first step, perhaps, toward bringing her private music into the light. She fell asleep with fragments of a new composition playing in her mind, something about courage and first steps and the terrifying possibility of being truly seen. The morning of the charity gala arrived, with a steady drizzle that turned the city streets slick and gray. Maya hurried into Harrington's through the back entrance, shaking water from her umbrella. She was 20 minutes early, but the kitchen already hummed with activity. Extra staff bustled around, preparing for what was clearly a major event. "There you are," Lee said, appearing beside her with a clipboard. "We're serving 200 guests tonight. The Symphony Foundation's annual fundraiser." She handed Maya a garment bag. "Owner wants everyone in formal uniform. This should fit." Maya unzipped the bag to find a crisp white blouse and black vest with the restaurant's logo embroidered in gold thread. "I thought I'd be doing regular tables. Change of plans. You're on drink service for the main ballroom. Less talking, more walking." Lee checked something off her list. The good news: rich people drink expensive stuff. Tips should be solid. Within an hour, the restaurant transformed. The regular dining area became an extension of the kitchen, while the large private event space, usually reserved for weddings and corporate parties, was set with round tables draped in cream linens. A small stage had been assembled at one end, complete with a gleaming black grand piano. Maya found herself staring at the instrument while arranging water glasses. It was a Steinway, probably worth more than she'd earn in several years. Her fingers twitched with familiar longing. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice beside her asked. Maya turned to find an older man in a tuxedo. His silver hair and bow tie gave him a distinguished look, though his warm smile seemed out of place among the usual clientele. "Yes, it is," she replied, straightening the last glass. "Are you performing tonight?" He chuckled. "Thankfully, no. I'm just the event organizer. Thomas Bailey, He offered his hand, which caught Maya off guard. The wealthy rarely introduced themselves to staff. I was admiring your precision with those glasses. Perfect alignment. Thank you, sir. Maya shook his hand briefly. I should check on the wine service. Of course. He nodded, then turned toward the stage where technicians were adjusting microphones. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Maya memorized the wine list, practiced carrying the heavy silver trays, and helped the other servers fold the signature swan napkins Mr. Harrington insisted upon for special events. By 6 o'clock, everything was ready and the first guests began to arrive. Maya moved through the growing crowd with practiced efficiency, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. The women wore glittering dresses and jewels that caught the light. The men stood in near-identical tuxedos, laughing at each other's jokes. To Maya, they all blurred together, faces she'd forget as soon as she turned away. More champagne, please, called a woman in a red dress. Maya moved toward her, offering the tray with a polite smile. As the woman took a glass, she continued her conversation without acknowledging Maya's presence. Absolute disaster. Pianist has food poisoning, apparently. What will Thomas do? Asked her companion, a man with an impressive mustache. The musical portion is the highlight of the evening. Scrambling to find a replacement, I imagine, Red Dress replied. Though at this hour, good luck. Maya moved on, filing the information away out of habit. Working in service, you learn to tune out conversations while simultaneously remembering useful details. Food preferences, allergies which guests might cause trouble. By 8 o'clock, the ballroom was filled with laughter and the clink of silverware against fine china. Maya's feet had begun to ache, but the evening was going smoothly. She'd just returned to the service bar for another tray of drinks when she heard raised voices. We cannot have a fundraiser for the symphony without music. It was Thomas Bailey, his earlier calm replaced by visible stress. He stood with Lee and Mr. Harrington near the kitchen entrance. I've called everyone, replied a young woman with a headset, whom Maya hadn't seen before. It's too late. Everyone's booked. Mr. Harrington looked furious. This makes my establishment look unprofessional, Bailey. You promised a first-class event. I understand and I take full responsibility, Thomas said. Perhaps we announce an abbreviated program and move directly to the pledge drive. Maya hadn't realized she was humming until all three turned to look at her. She froze, tray in hand, suddenly aware that the melody, Debussy's Clair de Lune, had been flowing from her lips without conscious thought. You, Thomas said, pointing. You know that piece. I'm sorry, Maya stammered. I didn't mean to interrupt. No. Thomas stepped closer. That's perfect pitch. Do you play? Before Maya could answer, Lee cut in. She's needed for service, Mr. Bailey. But Thomas wasn't deterred. Do you play the piano? Maya hesitated. Years of keeping her talent private made the question feel invasive. Yet something in Thomas's desperate expression made her nod. Yes, but I'm not. Could you fill in? Just for 30 minutes? We're desperate. Mr. Harrington frowned. Bailey, she's a waitress, not a performer. The words stung even though Maya had heard variations of them before. Always defined by her job, never by her ability. Thomas ignored him. Please, just one piece to start. If it doesn't work, we'll move on. I've been organizing this gala for 15 years, and we've never had a silent stage. Maya looked from Thomas's hopeful face to Mr. Harrington's skeptical one. She thought of the beautiful Steinway sitting untouched, of her late-night practices in her tiny apartment. The idea was terrifying. I don't have anything to wear, she said, gesturing to her server's uniform. Thomas brightened. We can solve that. Rebecca, take her to the green room. I'm sure we have something that will work. Before Maya could fully process what was happening, the woman with the headset, Rebecca, was leading her down a hallway to a small room filled with equipment cases and garment bags. Emergency performance attire, Rebecca explained, unzipping one bag to reveal a simple black dress. For orchestra members who spill something before showtime. She looked Maya up and down. Might be a bit big, but better than a server's uniform. Maya's hands trembled as she changed into the dress. What was she doing? These people had paid hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars for professional entertainment. She played alone in the dark with headphones. This was madness. 5 minutes, Rebecca said through the door. I'll introduce you as, what's your name?
Maya Chen. Maya Chen, last-minute guest performer.
Brief but brilliant. Rebecca's voice had taken on a promotional quality. Any specific piece you want announced? Maya thought quickly. Something familiar enough to be accessible, yet complex enough to showcase what she could do. Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto No. 2, first movement. There was a pause. That's ambitious. It's what I play, Maya replied, surprised by her own firmness. When she emerged, the dress hanging a bit loose at the shoulders but otherwise acceptable, Rebecca gave her an encouraging smile. Break a leg. And thank you for saving the gala. Maya followed her down the hallway toward the ballroom, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might be visible through the dress. The chatter of 200 wealthy patrons grew louder as they approached. Maya had never played for anyone except her mother and her childhood teacher. Now she would perform for critics, musicians, and patrons of the arts, people who could tell the difference between talent and true mastery. At the edge of the stage, Thomas waited with visible relief. "Thank you," he whispered. "Truly." Rebecca stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a slight program change this evening. Our scheduled pianist, unfortunately, could not be here due to sudden illness." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. However, we're delighted to present a special performance by Maya Chen. The spotlight found Maya as she walked toward the piano. The ballroom fell quiet, curious eyes following her movement. She spotted Mrs. Calloway at a front table, eyebrows raised in recognition. Mr. Harrington stood at the back, arms crossed. Maya sat at the bench, adjusting it slightly. The keys before her were pristine, inviting. She placed her fingers on them, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes of Rachmaninoff filled the space. Dark, resonant, powerful. Maya closed her eyes, letting her fingers find their way as they had done countless times before. The familiar melody washed over her, and gradually the audience, the gala, even her own anxiety faded away. There was only the music, flowing through her like electricity, each note exactly where it needed to be. She forgot she was a waitress playing for the elite, forgot the years of hiding her gift, forgot everything except the conversation between her hands and the magnificent instrument. And as she played, something extraordinary happened in the ballroom of Harrington's restaurant. 200 people, accustomed to the very best of everything, fell completely, utterly silent. Time seemed to stand still as Maya's fingers danced across the keys. The Rachmaninoff piece flowed through her with an intensity that surprised even her. She had played this composition countless times in her tiny apartment, but never on an instrument like this. A piano that responded to her lightest touch, that sang with a voice so rich it filled the entire ballroom. She had planned to play only the first movement, but as she reached its conclusion, her hands refused to stop. Without pausing, she transitioned into the second movement, then the third. The music poured out of her like a river breaking through a dam, unstoppable, powerful, alive. Maya played with her eyes closed, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm. She had forgotten the audience entirely, forgotten that she wore a borrowed dress, forgotten that just an hour ago, she had been serving these people champagne. In this moment, she was neither waitress nor performer. She was simply a vessel for something greater than herself. What the audience witnessed was something few had ever seen. Maya's playing went beyond technical perfection. She didn't just play the notes as written. She reimagined them, finding nuances and expressions that even seasoned musicians hadn't discovered. Her left hand created a heartbeat of bass notes while her right wove complex melodies that seemed impossible for 10 fingers alone. When she finally struck the last chord, letting it resonate through the room before lifting her hands from the keys, Maya kept her eyes closed for a moment longer, reluctant to break the spell. The silence that followed was absolute. No coughing, no whispers, not even the clink of glasses. Just 200 people holding their breath, then came a single gasp, a murmur, and suddenly, thunderous applause erupted, startling Maya's eyes open. The entire room was on its feet, a standing ovation that seemed to shake the crystal chandeliers. Maya blinked in the spotlight, momentarily confused by the sea of faces staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to delight to tears. Mrs. Calloway, who had never once looked directly at Maya during all her visits to the restaurant, now gaped openly, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Mr. Harrington stood near the back, his arms no longer crossed but hanging limply at his sides, his mouth slightly open. Thomas rushed to the stage, his face flushed with excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced into the microphone, having to wait for the applause to die down enough to be heard, Maya Chen. The applause renewed, even louder than before. Maya stood awkwardly, unsure what to do. She managed a small bow which only intensified the response. Encore, someone shouted from the back. Others took up the call, until the room echoed with requests for more. Thomas looked at her questioningly. Maya hesitated, then nodded. She returned to the piano bench and placed her hands on the keys. This time she chose something original, a piece she had composed during those long nights alone in her apartment. It was gentler than the Rachmaninoff, but no less complex, a melody that spoke of longing and hope and quiet resilience. The audience fell silent again as the unfamiliar music filled the room. Maya could feel their collective curiosity. This wasn't a classic they recognized, yet it held them just as captivated. When she finished, the applause was different, more thoughtful, more reverent. That was extraordinary, Thomas said as he escorted her from the stage. What was that last piece? I don't believe I've heard it before. You wouldn't have, Maya replied, still dazed from the experience. I wrote it. Thomas stopped walking, staring at her with new intensity. You composed that? Are you saying you're not only a brilliant pianist, but also a composer? Before Maya could respond, they were surrounded by guests. Well-dressed men and women pressed business cards into her hands, asking questions that tumbled over each other. Where did you study? Do you have representation? Have you recorded anything? Would you consider a private performance? A tall woman with silver-streaked hair cut through the crowd. Enough, she said firmly. Give the girl some space. She turned to Maya with keen eyes. I'm Vivian Reynolds, music director at the Philharmonic. We should talk. Mr. Harrington appeared at Maya's elbow, his earlier skepticism replaced by an oily smile. Ms. Reynolds, I see you've met our Maya, one of our most valued employees, though I had no idea of her remarkable talent until tonight. Vivian barely glanced at him. You employ a pianist of this caliber as a waitress? Mr. Harrington's smile faltered. Well, we at Harrington's pride ourselves on having exceptional staff in all positions. Ms. Chen, Vivian continued, ignoring him, I'd like to invite you to my office tomorrow. There's a fellowship program I think you would be perfect for. Here's my card. She handed Maya a simple white card with embossed lettering. Call my assistant in the morning. Before Maya could respond, another voice broke in. Ms. Reynolds is too modest, said a bearded man in thick glasses. She's offering you a spot in the most competitive fellowship in the country. I'm Ben Wong, music critic for The Times. I'd like to interview you for a feature. Your interpretation of Rachmaninoff was unlike anything I've heard, and that original composition, remarkable structure, extraordinary emotional range. Maya felt lightheaded. The room seemed to spin around her. Too many faces, too many voices, too much attention after years of deliberate invisibility. I need a moment, she managed, backing away. She found refuge in the same green room where she'd changed earlier. Closing the door, she leaned against it and took deep breaths. What had she done? Her private world, her secret self, was suddenly public property. The thought was terrifying. A gentle knock made her jump. Maya? It was Thomas. Are you all right? She opened the door slightly. Thomas stood alone, concern on his face. I'm sorry about the crowd. I should have anticipated the reaction. It's okay, Maya said, though her trembling hands betrayed her. I'm just not used to any of this. May I come in? Just to talk for a moment? Maya hesitated, then nodded. Thomas entered but kept a respectful distance. What you did tonight was extraordinary, he said quietly. Not just technically brilliant, but transformative. I've been organizing this gala for 15 years. I've heard world-class musicians perform on that stage. None of them silenced a room the way you did. Maya sank into a chair. I don't know what happened. I just played? No, Thomas shook his head. What you did was far more than just playing. You connected with everyone in that room on a level that transcended ordinary performance. He paused. May I ask a personal question? Where did you learn to play like that? Maya looked down at her hands. Waitress hands, calloused and cracked from hot water and cleaning solutions. Not a pianist's elegant fingers. Yet tonight, they had created something beautiful. I had lessons as a child, she began slowly. But then, something happened when I was 12. An accident. She rarely talked about the car crash, the coma, the strange awakening to a world where music had taken on new dimensions. After that, everything changed. Music looked different to me. Sounded different. I could see patterns, connections. Acquired savant syndrome, Thomas said softly. Maya looked up, surprised. Yes, how did you know? My brother experienced something similar after a stroke. Not with music, but with mathematics. He smiled gently. Extraordinary gifts often come from unexpected sources. I had to stop formal training when my family couldn't afford it anymore, Maya continued. Since then, I've just played for myself. Until tonight. Thomas considered her words. And now? Will you pursue this? You've been given some incredible opportunities tonight. Maya thought about Vivian Reynolds' card in her pocket, about the critic who wanted to interview her, about the way the music had flowed through her, freed from the constraints of her tiny apartment and cheap digital piano. I don't know, she admitted. It's overwhelming. I've spent years being invisible and now suddenly, you're seen, Thomas finished for her, truly seen perhaps for the first time. Maya nodded, tears unexpectedly filling her eyes. It's terrifying. Yes, Thomas agreed. Being seen always is, but there's freedom in it too. He stood. Whatever you decide, that performance changed lives tonight. Including yours, I suspect. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rebecca poked her head in. Sorry to intrude, but they're asking for you, Thomas. The pledge drive needs to begin. Of course. He turned back to Maya. Take all the time you need. Use this room as long as you like. And Maya, thank you, not just for saving the gala, but for reminding all of us why we care about music in the first place. After he left, Maya sat alone, turning Vivian Reynolds' card over in her fingers. Through the walls, she could hear the muffled sounds of the gala continuing. Speeches, applause, the clinking of glasses. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lee. Where are you? Harrington looking for you. Reality rushed back. She was still an employee here. She still had rent to pay. Bills due next week. The glamour of the performance was already fading like a dream upon waking, yet something had fundamentally changed. Maya had stepped out of the shadows, if only for a moment, and the world had responded with wonder. The question now was whether she had the courage to remain in the light. Maya didn't sleep that night. She returned to her tiny apartment just before dawn, her mind replaying every moment of the performance, the faces in the crowd, the thunderous applause, Vivian Reynolds' business card, now carefully placed on her kitchen counter beside a growing stack of others, producers, journalists, music directors, and wealthy patrons who had pressed their contact information into her hands. She sat on the edge of her fold-out bed, still wearing the borrowed black dress. She'd need to return it, though Rebecca had whispered, "Keep it," with a wink as Maya slipped out of Harrington's after the gala. The restaurant had buzzed with activity even at midnight, staff cleaning up, guests lingering to discuss the unexpected performance by a waitress. Maya's phone had been constantly vibrating with texts from coworkers. OMG Chen. Since when are you a piano goddess? Harrington, freaking out, didn't know whether to fire you or promote you. Rich lady asking for your number. Gave her fake one. You're welcome. She'd silenced it eventually, overwhelmed by the attention. Now as morning light filtered through her thin curtains, Maya finally reached for the phone. 27 missed calls, 15 voicemails, dozens of texts, and most surprisingly, an email from Vivian Reynolds herself, sent at 3 a.m. Ms. Chen, I rarely make exceptions to our formal application process, but after tonight's revelation, I'm prepared to offer you an immediate audition for our fellowship program. This is unprecedented. Please call my office first thing tomorrow. Your talent demands proper nurturing. V. Reynolds. Maya set the phone down with trembling hands. This was everything she had secretly dreamed of. Recognition, opportunity, a chance to develop her gift under proper guidance. Yet terror gripped her at the thought of stepping fully into that world, exposing herself to judgment and expectations after years of protective anonymity. She showered, watching the glitter from the charity gala swirl down the drain. As she dried her hair, a memory surfaced, her mother's voice soft but determined, after they'd received the diagnosis of acquired savant syndrome. This gift came at a terrible price, Maya, but it's yours now. Don't waste it out of fear. Her mother had worked double shifts to pay for lessons as long as she could. Would she have wanted Maya to hide in restaurant kitchens, playing only in secret? The answer seemed obvious, yet taking the first step felt impossible. A sharp knock startled her from her thoughts. Nobody ever visited. Maya pulled on a robe and approached her door cautiously. Who is it? Ben Wong, music critic. We met last night. Maya froze. The critic had found her address? That couldn't be good. She opened the door just enough to see the bearded man from the gala, looking rumpled in the same tuxedo minus the bow tie. Ms. Chen, I apologize for the intrusion, he said, seeming genuinely contrite. Your colleague at Harrington's, Zach, I believe, reluctantly provided your address after considerable persuasion. Zach gave you my address? Maya frowned, making a mental note to never trust the bartender again. Only after I convinced him of the urgency. May I come in? I promise this is important. Against her better judgment, Maya opened the door. Ben Wong stepped inside, taking in her tiny apartment with a quick glance. His eyes settled on the digital piano in the corner. So this is where the magic happens, he murmured. May I? He gestured toward her only chair. Maya nodded, tightening her robe. Mr. Wong, this is highly irregular. Please call me Ben. He sat down, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I couldn't wait. My editor is pushing for an exclusive. Your story is extraordinary. Waitress with hidden genius captivates elite audience. It writes itself. I'm not interested in publicity, Maya said firmly. That's what makes it even better, Ben exclaimed, then caught himself. Sorry, journalist instincts. But Miss Chen, Maya, you need to understand what happened last night. It wasn't just a good performance. It was a revelation. I've reviewed concerts for 23 years. I've heard the greatest pianists of our time. What you did was different. Maya looked away, uncomfortable with his intensity. It was just one night. It could be the first of many. Ben leaned forward. Vivian Reynolds doesn't offer fellowships on a whim. She's notoriously selective. If she's interested, it means something. How do you know she's interested? Ben smiled wryly. The music world is small, and I have my sources. She called 3 board members before she left the gala last night. They're expediting everything for you. Maya sat on the edge of her bed, the full implications sinking in. I don't understand why. I'm not formally trained. I haven't played publicly in years. There must be hundreds of qualified pianists. Thousands, Ben corrected. And none with what you have. Technical skill can be taught. What you possess can't be. He studied her. The accident when you were 12. That's when it changed, wasn't it? Maya stiffened. How do you know about that? Thomas Bailey mentioned it. Don't worry, he added quickly, seeing her expression. Just the basics, car accident, coma, remarkable ability afterward. I've covered stories of acquired savant syndrome before. It's rare but documented. Is that why everyone's interested? Because I'm some kind of neurological curiosity? The thought made Maya feel sick. A freak show for the music elite? No, Ben said firmly. They're interested because of what you created with those 10 fingers last night. The origin is a fascinating footnote, but the music, that's what matters. That final piece, the one you composed, it was extraordinary. Is there more where that came from? Maya glanced involuntarily toward the stack of notebooks on her shelf. Years of compositions, never shared with anyone. Ben followed her gaze and raised his eyebrows. I see. Then the world has much to look forward to. He stood, seeming to sense her discomfort. I didn't come just for the story, though my editor would kill me for saying so. I came because talent like yours deserves a platform. My piece can help with that. Or it could make things worse, Maya countered. I'm not ready for the attention. Few genuinely talented people are. Ben pulled out a business card, another for her growing collection. Think about it. If you decide to pursue this path, having the right introduction matters. I can provide that. After he left, Maya sank back onto her bed, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She had a shift at Harrington's that evening, if she even still had a job. The thought of returning there, of serving drinks to people who had seen her perform, made her cringe. Her phone rang again. This time it was Lee. Chen, where are you? Harrington's been calling nonstop. I'm home, Maya replied. Do I still have a job? Lee snorted. Are you kidding? After last night? He's torn between firing you for deception and promoting you to entertainment director. Mostly he's freaking out because every reservation for the next month is asking if the piano waitress will be performing. What should I do? Honestly, leverage it. Get what you can from the old man. He's suddenly telling everyone he discovered you. There was a pause. But Maya? Those people last night, they can offer you more than Harrington ever will. Maya thanked her and hung up. She looked around her small apartment at the life she'd built. Safe. Predictable. limited. Then her eyes fell on her mother's photograph, the only decoration on her wall. Her mother had sacrificed everything to nurture Maya's gift for as long as she could. With sudden determination, Maya picked up her phone and dialed Vivian Reynolds' office number. "Reynolds' office," a crisp voice answered. "This is Maya Chen. Ms. Reynolds asked me to call." "Ms. Chen, yes, she's been expecting your call. Can you come in at 2 this afternoon?" Maya took a deep breath. "Yes, I'll be there." The Philharmonic's administrative offices occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown tower. Maya had passed the building countless times but never imagined entering it. Now, wearing the only formal outfit she owned, black pants and a white blouse, her waitress uniform minus the apron, she stood in a wood-paneled reception area, trying not to fidget. "Ms. Chen," Vivian Reynolds emerged from a corner office, hand extended. "Thank you for coming. Please join me." Vivian's office featured floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city park. Awards and photographs lined the walls. Vivian with famous musicians, conductors, composers. Maya felt impossibly out of place. "I expect you're overwhelmed," Vivian said, gesturing to a chair. "That's natural. Talent like yours, hidden for so long, suddenly thrust into the spotlight." "I'm not sure what I'm doing here," Maya admitted. "You're here because you played Rachmaninoff like you'd written it yourself, and then played something you actually did write that left half my board in tears." Vivian's direct gaze was penetrating. "You're here because you have a gift that deserves cultivation." "The fellowship program," Maya said. "Yes. Normally, we require extensive auditions, recommendations, a performance history. But sometimes, very rarely, we make exceptions." Vivian leaned forward. "You would work with master teachers, have access to our facilities, receive a modest stipend. Most importantly, you would have time and space to develop your talent." It sounded perfect, almost too perfect. "What's the catch?" Vivian smiled slightly. "Perceptive. Yes, there are conditions. You would be expected to perform regularly, to collaborate with our orchestra, to represent the Philharmonic at certain events. Public appearances," Maya said, her stomach tightening. "Yes. Your story is compelling, Miss Chen. The waitress with extraordinary talent. It's the kind of narrative that attracts donors, sells tickets." Vivian's expression softened slightly. "I understand that may be challenging for you. But consider the alternative, remaining in the shadows, your gift unshared." Maya looked out the window at the city below. People moving through their days, unaware of the crossroads she faced in this high-rise office. She thought of her performance, of the connection she'd felt with the music and through it with every person in that room. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course, but not too much time." Vivian handed her a thick folder, the details of the fellowship. "We need your answer by Friday. 3 days to decide the direction of her life." As Maya rode the elevator down to the street, the folder heavy in her hands, she realized how quickly everything had changed. 3 days ago, she had been invisible, anonymous. Now she had choices to make. Back in her apartment, Maya opened the folder. Pages of opportunities, requirements, schedules, a contract, a new life laid out in black and white. She set it aside and uncovered her piano, placing her fingers on the keys without pressing down. "What would you do, Mom?" she whispered to the empty room. The answer came not in words but in music, the piece she had composed after her mother's death, full of sorrow and resilience. Maya began to play, softly at first, then with growing confidence. By the time she finished, tears streaked her face, but her mind was clearer. She knew what she had to do. Friday morning arrived with a gentle rain tapping against Maya's window. She sat at her small kitchen table, the fellowship contract before her unsigned. In the 3 days since meeting with Vivian Reynolds, Maya had barely slept. She'd called in sick to Harrington's, ignoring Mr. Harrington's increasingly frantic voicemails. She needed space to think, to decide. Her phone rang again. Ben Wong, the music critic, for the 5th time that day. Maya let it go to voicemail. She'd received dozens of calls. Television producers wanting interviews, wealthy patrons offering private concerts, even a recording company interested in the Waitress pianist phenomenon. The attention felt suffocating, yet alongside the anxiety ran a current of something else. A quiet excitement, a sense of possibility she hadn't felt in years. When she played her piano these past few nights, something had changed. The music flowed differently, as if her brief moment in the spotlight had unlocked new depths in her playing. Maya picked up a pen, then set it down again. The fellowship offered everything she'd dreamed of: training, opportunities, recognition. But Vivian's words echoed in her mind. Your story is compelling. The waitress with extraordinary talent, was that all they wanted? A heartwarming narrative to sell tickets? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Maya approached cautiously, wary of more journalists or music industry people who had somehow found her address. Who is it? She called. Thomas Bailey. Maya opened the door to find the silver-haired event organizer from the gala, looking much more casual in jeans and a sweater than he had in his tuxedo. Mr. Bailey, how did you find me? He smiled apologetically. Rebecca knows Zach from Harrington's. I'm sorry for the intrusion, but I wanted to check on you. And please call me Thomas. Maya hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. I'm afraid I don't have much to offer. Tea? That would be lovely. As Maya filled her kettle, Thomas noticed the contract on the table. Ah, the fellowship. Have you decided? Not yet. Maya set out 2 mismatched mugs. Today's the deadline. Thomas nodded but said nothing, giving her space to continue if she wished. It's a remarkable opportunity, Maya said, pouring hot water over tea bags. Everything I should want, but, Thomas prompted gently, but I'm not sure they want me for the right reasons. Maya sat across from him, cradling her mug. Vivian made it clear my story is part of the appeal. The novelty of it. That may be how they discovered you, but it's not why they want you, Thomas said. I've known Vivian for 20 years. She wouldn't offer this fellowship if she didn't believe in your talent, regardless of your background. Maybe. Maya sipped her tea. But there are expectations attached. Public performances, media appearances. They want to put me on display. Is that so terrible? Thomas asked. Sharing your gift? It terrifies me, Maya admitted. That night at the gala, I could only do it because it was unexpected. I didn't have time to be afraid. But now, knowing people would be watching, judging, Thomas considered her words. May I share something personal? Maya nodded. My brother, the one with acquired savant syndrome like yours, struggled similarly. After his stroke, he could suddenly create mathematical proofs that astonished experts. Universities wanted to study him. Journals wanted to publish him. He hid from it all for nearly a year. What changed? He realized his gift wasn't just for him. Thomas smiled sadly. He told me, if I can solve problems others can't, don't I have some responsibility to try? He's at MIT now, working on theories that might someday help build better renewable energy systems. Maya looked toward her piano. Music is different. It's not solving world problems, isn't it? Thomas raised an eyebrow. What did you feel when you played that night? Connected, Maya said without hesitation. To the music, to everyone in the room. Like we were all part of something bigger. And how did the audience respond? Maya thought back to the faces she'd seen. Some tear-streaked, others transported, all completely present in the moment. They felt it too. In a world of division and distraction, that kind of connection is extraordinary, Thomas said quietly. Perhaps as valuable as any mathematical breakthrough. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain pattering against the window. I have an alternative to propose, Thomas finally said. One that might address your concerns. I'm listening. The Symphony Foundation, the organization behind the gala, has an outreach program. We bring music education to schools that have lost their arts funding. We're always looking for teaching artists. Maya frowned. I'm not a teacher. You could be. And it would allow you to share your gift without the spotlight of concert halls. The pay isn't comparable to the fellowship, but I don't care about the money, Maya interrupted. But I have no teaching credentials. Credentials can be arranged, Thomas said. What we need are musicians who can inspire, who can show children what's possible. He paused. Of course, this doesn't have to be instead of the fellowship. It could be in addition to it. Maya's mind raced with new possibilities. Teaching hadn't occurred to her. The thought of helping children discover music, perhaps finding those with hidden gifts of their own, held an appeal she hadn't expected. I'd need to think about it, she said. Thomas nodded and stood to leave. Whatever you decide, Maya, don't let fear be the deciding factor. Your gift is too extraordinary for that. After he left, Maya sat at her piano. She played softly, letting her fingers find their own path across the keys. A new melody emerged, something hopeful yet tinged with uncertainty, like first steps on an unfamiliar path. The decision crystallized slowly as she played. By the time the last notes faded, Maya knew what she had to do. 2 hours later, she sat in Vivian Reynolds' office, the unsigned contract between them. "I've made my decision," Maya said, her voice steadier than she'd expected. Vivian waited, hands folded on her desk. "I want to accept the fellowship," Maya continued, "but with conditions." Vivian's eyebrows rose slightly. "Conditions?" "Yes. First, I want to limit public performances for the initial 6 months. I need time to develop my skills without pressure." "That's reasonable," Vivian conceded. "And?" "Second, I want to participate in the Symphony Foundation's education outreach program, teaching in schools alongside my fellowship studies." This clearly surprised Vivian. "That's an unusual request." "The fellowship is demanding enough without adding teaching responsibilities." "It's important to me," Maya said firmly. "Those children deserve access to music education, and I think I need it as much as they do." Vivian studied her for a long moment. "You're not what I expected, Miss Chen." "I'm still figuring out what to expect from myself," Maya replied honestly. A smile tugged at the corner of Vivian's mouth. "Very well. I believe we can accommodate your conditions." She extended her hand. "Welcome to the Philharmonic family." 3 months later, Maya stood in the auditorium of an underfunded public school on the city's east side. 30 children, ages 8 to 12, watched her with varying degrees of interest as she sat at an old upright piano. "Today," she said, "we're going to talk about how music can tell a story without words." A boy in the back row raised his hand. "Are you really the waitress who played at that fancy party?" "My mom showed me the video online," Maya smiled. The video, a shaky cell phone recording of her gala performance, had indeed gone viral. Ben Wang's article had run in the Times, more thoughtful and less sensationalistic than she'd feared. Her life had transformed in ways she was still adjusting to. "Yes, that was me," she answered. "But before that night, I was just someone who loved music and played alone in my apartment." "Were you scared?" a girl in the front asked. "Terrified," Maya admitted. "But sometimes the things that scare us most are exactly what we need to do." She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play, not Rachmaninoff this time, but a simple piece she'd composed especially for these classes. As she played, she watched the children's faces. Some closed their eyes. Others tapped their feet. A few leaned forward, mesmerized by the movement of her hands. When she finished, a small hand shot up from the middle of the group. It belonged to a quiet girl who had rarely participated in previous lessons. "Yes, Lily?" Maya encouraged. "Can you teach me to do that?" the girl asked, her voice barely audible. "I hear music in my head sometimes, but I don't know how to make it come out." Maya's heart swelled with unexpected emotion. "Yes," she said. "That's exactly why I'm here." Later that evening, Maya prepared for her first small recital at the Philharmonic's Chamber Music Hall. The audience would be limited, mostly board members, other fellows, and a few critics. A gentle introduction to public performance, as Vivian had promised. As she practiced in the rehearsal room, Thomas stopped by. "Nervous?" he asked. "Less than I expected," Maya replied. "After facing 30 children with short attention spans, a few music critics seems manageable." Thomas laughed. "How are the classes going?" "They're—" Maya searched for the right word. "Healing. For me as much as for them." "I thought they might be." Thomas sat beside her on the bench. "What will you play tonight?" "Something new," Maya said. "A piece I started composing that night at the gala and finished last week. I'm calling it Becoming Visible." "Perfect title." Maya nodded. In the months since her unexpected performance, she had indeed become visible, not just to the music world, but to herself. The path ahead wasn't easy. There were still days when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her, when she questioned her choices. But those moments were balanced by new joys. A child's face lighting up when they played their first scale, the fellowship community that had welcomed her, the music that continued to flow through her stronger than ever. 5 minutes. "Ms. Chen," a stagehand called from the doorway. Maya stood, smoothing her concert dress, a new one properly fitted this time. "Ready?" Thomas asked. Maya took a deep breath and smiled. "Ready." As she walked toward the stage, Maya thought of her mother, of the long journey from that childhood accident to this moment. She thought of her tiny apartment, which she'd recently moved out of, and Harrington's, where she'd given her notice, though she still visited her former coworkers. Most of all, she thought of the music waiting inside her. No longer a secret, no longer confined to late nights and headphones. As she stepped into the spotlight and approached the gleaming grand piano, Maya Chen was no longer invisible. She was a